Chapter 13. On Whose Side Most? He might think about the red-haired girl, and yet his soul was in agonies of vexation and remorse. And, indeed, during the whole of that day, which seemed on the surface so amusingly spent, a feeling of acute depression had scarcely left him. Before singing the song, he did not know how to get away from it. Perhaps that was why he had sung it with such fervor.
And I could demean myself like that. Tear myself away from everything,
he began reproaching himself, but he hurriedly cut short his thoughts. Indeed, it seemed to him humiliating to lament. It was a great deal more pleasant to be angry with someone.
"Fool,"
he whispered wrathfully, with a side glance at the silent figure of Pavel Pavlovitch sitting beside him in the carriage. Pavel Pavlovitch remained obstinately silent, perhaps concentrated on preparing what he had got to say. With an impatient gesture he sometimes took off his hat and wiped his brow with his handkerchief.
"Perspiring,"
Velchaninov thought spitefully. On one occasion only Pavel Pavlovitch addressed a question to the coachman. "Is there going to be a storm?" he asked. "Storm indeed! Not a doubt of it. It's been brewing up all day." The sky was indeed growing dark, and there were flashes of lightning in the distance. They reached the town about 10:30. "I am coming in with you, of course," Pavel Pavlovitch warned him, not far from the house.
"I understand, but I must tell you that I feel seriously unwell."
"I won't stay long." When they went in at the gate, Pavel Pavlovitch ran in at the porter's lodge to find Mavra.
"What were you running off there for?"
Velchaninov said sternly, as the latter overtook him and they went into the room. "Oh, nothing. The driver."
"I won't have you drink."
No answer followed. Velchaninov lighted the candle, and Pavel Pavlovitch at once sat down on the chair. Velchaninov remained standing before him, with a frown on his face.
"I, too, promised to say my last word," he began, with an inward, still suppressed irritation. "Here it is. That word. I consider on my conscience that everything between us is over, so that, in fact, there is nothing for us to talk about. Do you hear? Nothing. And so, wouldn't it be better for you to go away at once, and I'll close the door after you?"
"Let us settle our account, Alexey Ivanovitch," said Pavel Pavlovitch, looking in his face, however, with peculiar mildness.
"Settle our account,"
repeated Velchaninov, greatly surprised.
"That's a strange thing to say. Settle what account? Bah! Isn't that perhaps that last word you promised to reveal to me?"
"It is."
"We've no account to settle. Account long ago," Velchaninov pronounced proudly.
"Can you really think so?" Pavel Pavlovitch brought out, in a voice full of feeling, clasping his hands strangely and holding them before his breast. Velchaninov made him no answer, but continued pacing up and down the room.
Lisa, Lisa,"
he was moaning in his heart.
"What did you want to settle, though?"
he asked him, frowning, after a rather prolonged silence. Pavel Pavlovitch had been following him about the room with his eyes all this time, still holding his hands clasped before him. "Don't go there again," he almost whispered, in a voice of entreaty, and he suddenly got up from his chair.
"What? So that's all you are thinking about?"
Velchaninov laughed spitefully.
"You've surprised me all day, though,"
he was beginning malignantly, but suddenly his whole face changed.
"Listen,"
he said mournfully, with deep and sincere feeling.
I consider that I have never lowered myself as I have today. To begin with, by consenting to go with you, and then, by what happened there. It was so paltry, so pitiful. I've defiled and debased myself by mixing myself up in it. And forgetting. But there, he cried hastily. Listen, you attacked me today in an unguarded moment when I was nervous and ill. But there's no need to justify myself. I'm not going there again, and I assure you I take no interest in them whatever, he concluded resolutely. Really? Really? Cried Pavel Pavlovitch, not disguising his relief and excitement. Velchaninov looked at him contemptuously, and began pacing up and down the room again. You seem to have made up your mind to be happy, he could not refrain from observing. Yes, Pavel Pavlovitch repeated naively, in a low voice. What is it to me, Velchaninov reflected, that he's a buffoon, and only spiteful through stupidity? I can't help hating him, though he isn't worth it. I am the eternal husband, said Pavel Pavlovitch, with an abjectly submissive smile at his own expense. I heard that expression from you, Alexey Ivanovitch, long ago, when you were staying with us in those days. I remember a great many of your sayings in that year. Last time, when you said here, the eternal husband, I reflected. Mavra came in with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. Forgive me, Alexey Ivanovitch. You know that I can't get on without it. Don't think it's impudence. Look upon me as an outsider, not on your level. Yes, Velchaninov muttered with repugnance. But I assure you I feel unwell. Directly. In 1 minute, said Pavel Pavlovitch fussily. Just 1 little glass before my throat. He greedily tossed off a glassful at a gulp and sat down, looking almost tenderly at Velchaninov. Mavra went out. How beastly, Velchaninov murmured. It's only those girlfriends, Pavel Pavlovitch said confidently, all of a sudden completely revived. What? Ah, yes, you are still at that. It's only those girlfriends. And then, she's so young. We have our little airs and graces. They're charming, in fact. But then, you know, I shall be her slave. When she's treated with deference, when she sees something of society, she'll be transformed. I shall have to give him back that bracelet, though, thought Velchaninov, scowling as he felt the case in his pocket. You say that I'm resolved to be happy. I must get married, Alexey Ivanovitch, Pavel Pavlovitch went on confidentially, and almost touchingly, or what will become of me? You see for yourself. He pointed to the bottle. And that's only 1/100th of my vices. I can't get on at all without marriage, and without new faith. I shall have faith, and rise up again. But why on earth do you tell me this? Velchaninov asked, almost bursting with laughter. It all struck him as wild. But tell me, he cried, what was your object in dragging me out there? What did you want me there for? As a test, Pavel Pavlovitch seemed suddenly embarrassed. A test of what? The effect. You see, Alexey Ivanovitch, it's only a week altogether. I've been looking round there. Pavel Pavlovitch grew more and more outside, so to say, society, that is, in men's, except my own. A stupid idea. I feel that myself now. Unnecessary. I expected too much. It's my horrible character.
He suddenly raised his head and flushed crimson. Can he be telling the whole truth? Velchaninov was petrified with surprise. Well, and what then? He asked. Pavel Pavlovitch gave a sugary and, as it were, crafty smile. It's only charming childishness. It's all those girlfriends. Only forgive me for my stupid behavior before you today, Alexey Ivanovitch. I never will again. And indeed, it will never happen again. And I shan't be there again, said Velchaninov, with a smile. That's partly what I mean. Velchaninov felt a little piqued. But I'm not the only man in the world, you know, he observed irritably. Pavel Pavlovitch flushed again. It's sad for me to hear that, Alexey Ivanovitch, and, believe me, I've such a respect for Nadyezhda Fedosyevna. Excuse me. I didn't mean anything. It only seems a little strange to me that you have such an exaggerated idea of my attractions, and such genuine confidence in me. I had such confidence just because it was, after all, that happened in the past. Then if so, you look upon me even now as a most honorable man, said Velchaninov, suddenly halting. At another time he would have been horrified at the naivete of his own question. I always thought you so, said Pavel Pavlovitch, dropping his eyes. Why, of course. I didn't mean that. That is, not in that sense. I only meant to say that, in spite of any preconceptions... Yes, in spite of preconceptions. When you came to Petersburg? Velchaninov could not resist asking, though he felt how utterly monstrous was his curiosity. When I came to Petersburg, too, I looked upon you as the most honorable of men. I always respected you, Alexey Ivanovitch. Pavel Pavlovitch raised his eyes and looked candidly, without a trace of embarrassment, at his opponent. Velchaninov was suddenly panic-stricken. He was not at all anxious that anything should happen, or that anything should overstep a certain line, especially as he had provoked it. I loved you, Alexey Ivanovitch, Pavel Pavlovitch articulated, as though he had suddenly made up his mind to speak. And all that year at tea I loved you. You did not notice it, he went on, in a voice that quivered, to Velchaninov's positive horror. I was too insignificant, compared with you, to let you see it. And there was no need, indeed, perhaps. And I've thought of you all these 9 years, because there has never been another year in my life like that one. Pavel Pavlovitch's eyes began to glisten. I remembered many of your phrases and sayings, your thoughts. I always thought of you as a man with a passion for every noble feeling, a man of education, of the highest education, and of ideas. Great ideas spring not so much from noble intelligence as from noble feeling. You said that yourself. Perhaps you've forgotten it. But I remembered it. I always looked on you, therefore, as a man of noble feeling, and therefore believed in you, in spite of anything. His chin suddenly began quivering. Velchaninov was in absolute terror. This unexpected tone must be cut short at all costs. That's enough, Pavel Pavlovitch, please, he muttered, flushing and irritably impatient. And why, he screamed suddenly, why do you fasten upon a man when he is nervous and ill, when he is almost delirious, and drag him into this darkness? When it's nothing but delusion, mirage, and falsity, and shameful, and unnatural, and exaggerated. And that's what's worst. That's what's most shameful, that it is so exaggerated.
and it's all nonsense. We are both vicious, underground, loathsome people. And if you like, I'll prove that you don't like me at all, but hate me with all your might, and that you're lying, though you don't know it. You insisted on taking me there, not with the absurd object of testing your future bride. What an idea! You saw me yesterday and felt vindictive, and took me there to show me and say to me, "See, what a prize! She will be mine. Do your worst now." You challenged me. Perhaps you didn't know it yourself. That's how it was, for that's what you were feeling. And without hating me, you couldn't have challenged me like that. And so you hate me.
He rushed about the room as he shouted this. What harassed and mortified him most of all was the humiliating consciousness that he was demeaning himself so far to Pavel Pavlovitch. "I wanted to be reconciled with you, Alexey Ivanovitch," the other articulated suddenly, in a rapid whisper, and his chin began twitching again. Velchaninov was overcome by furious rage, as though no one had ever insulted him so much.
"I tell you again," he yelled, "that you're fastening upon a man who's nervous and ill. That you're fastening upon him to extort something monstrous from him in delirium. We are men of different worlds. Understand that, and between us lies a grave," he added in a furious whisper, and suddenly realized what he had done. "And how do you know?" Pavel Pavlovitch's face was suddenly pale and distorted. "How do you know what that little grave here means? For me!" he cried, stepping up to Velchaninov with a ridiculous but horrible gesture, pressing his fist against his heart. "I know that little grave here, and we both stand at the side of that little grave. But on my side there is more than on yours. More," he whispered, as though in delirium, still thumping at his heart with his fist. "More, more, more." Suddenly, an extraordinarily loud ring at the door brought both of them to their senses. The bell rang so violently that it seemed as though someone had vowed to break it at the first pull. "People don't ring like that to see me," said Velchaninov in perplexity. "Not to see me either," Pavel Pavlovitch whispered timidly, recovering himself too, and at once turning into the old Pavel Pavlovitch again. Velchaninov scowled and went to open the door. "M. Velchaninov, if I'm not mistaken," they heard in a ringing, youthful, and exceptionally self-confident voice in the passage. "What is it?" "I have trustworthy information," continued the ringing voice, "that a certain Trusotsky is with you at this moment. I must see him instantly." It would certainly have pleased Velchaninov at that moment to have given the self-confident young gentleman a vigorous kick, and to have sent him flying out on the stairs. But he thought a moment, moved aside, and let him in. "Here is M. Trusotsky. Come in."